Tata Sattva Sri Srimati Bhaktisiddhanta Goswami His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktisiddhanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Om Vishnu Paramahansa Purajika Chaya Astu Tata Sattva Sri Srimati Bhaktisiddhanta Goswami His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Superior State Ki Go Premanande Samavita Bhaktivinoda Ki. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and all Angad Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Radhanath Swami Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktisiddhanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauram Kuchaya Shunya Hare Krishna. So, thank you for allowing me to try to speak a few words today on the appearance day of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. I thought I shouldn't sit here. I should listen to all of you who are serving in this wonderful place of New Mayapur. It is really a wonderful place. It's my second time here. I was here 5 years ago, and then my wife and I, we visited here for a few days in connection with the marriage of Martin Gopal and Damayanti. And actually, it's truly, it's really a truly upbeat mood here at New Mayapur. That's it's kind of a sleeping giant awakening. And it's really nice to see that there's such a nice group of devotees who are definitely working to manifest the project that Prabhupada really envisioned for this place. So I'm happy to be here, and by your blessings, maybe I can say something about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, which is not easy. Then again, there's so much to say about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Once Prabhupada was asked by a disciple, can you say something about your Guru Maharaj? And Prabhupada answered, what can I say? He was a Vaikuntha man. And so that should also be us. What can we say about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur? It's interesting that I was just reading Giriraj Maharaj telling about the appearance day celebration of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in 1917 in Boston. Prabhupada was there, and it was the appearance day of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Prabhupada there, that was the first time he introduced the Vyasa Puja ceremony and the worship of the Guru. And Prabhupada told him, this is how the Guru should be worshipped. Then later on, he also introduced devotees that actually I should also be worshipped that because I'm your Guru. But that was in 1970, the first time he introduced the Vyasa Puja worship of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And one thing that Prabhupada told his devotees was, you should write some words in glorification of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, your Param Guru. And Giriraj Maharaj, he relates that he thought that, what can I do? I don't know anything about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Anyway, I can write two things. So he wrote two things, and he had two realizations about the glories of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, which was that one thing, he must be a very great person, since Prabhupada has accepted him as his guru, because Prabhupada is such a great personality. So his guru must really be a great personality. That he, so that says something about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, that he could have a disciple like Prabhupada. And then he also understood that it's actually Prabhupada is here by the order of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So that also shows something about the immense compassion of this great soul, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. That he had in mind the whole humanity. He had in mind souls that he had no connection with. Still, he had immense compassion for all souls in this the whole universe, on this whole planet, and not just emotion, but actually he arranged practically for the deliverance of all souls, such as us. And he made so many attempts. He was preaching, of course, all over India, and he arranged and he made several attempts to send preachers out to the rest of the world with the message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna consciousness. And he sent out preachers already in the 1930s. He had preachers going to London and trying to start a center there. And they were there. They were not ultimately, although they did make little impression, and there was actually a couple of ladies were initiated and like that. So it wasn't that it was complete waste. Something was there, but they came back, and well, it wasn't that much. And of course, later on, Prabhupada took up the order of his spiritual master, and by his spiritual master's grace, and he was ultimately successful. So now there are devotees of Krishna all over the world. It's an amazing fact, actually. Although we think, there's so few devotees, and there's so many. How can Krishna consciousness be spread to all the suffering conditioned souls in this modern age? And it seems overwhelming. But the fact is that there are devotees wherever we go is actually truly amazing. That was not there 100 years ago. 100 years ago it's also a very significant date, by the way, 1922. You may remember that was the year Prabhupada first met his spiritual master Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in Calcutta at Ultadanga Road. And as you're probably also aware, that this property has been acquired by ISKCON in Calcutta. You aware of that? And no? Today you can go on Zoom, YouTube, something like that, and follow. There's a big ceremony being streamed, whole day ceremony. The ISKCON acquired this very property where Prabhupada met with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in 1922. The house is still there. It was same house, very dilapidated, but ISKCON took it and has completely renovated it. So now it's back to look the same that it did in 1922. And today there is a big opening ceremony. So now the same place where Prabhupada met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati 100 years ago. I don't know exact which date he met on that. Maybe some of you are aware of it, but it's 100 years ago. So that place is today being inaugurated. It has been restored back to its original as it was during the time when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati he was having his Gaudiya Mat and was disciples there at this place. Of course, then later on, because this is not a big place, I believe it was 1930, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati inaugurated the Bhatt Bazar temple, which is a very big property in Calcutta. Any of you have been there to Bhatt Bazar, so it's a very impressive place. So that was also 100 years ago. But 100 years ago there were no devotees all over the world. Now there are actually devotees all over the world. And of course we could wish, I can see for myself, what kind of devotee is that? But at least there are some who are practicing or trying to become devotees, and there are so many devotees all over the world. Actually, how many devotees do we have all over the world? Any idea? but in 2016 there was, when it was the 50th year of the inauguration of ISKCON, it was estimated that between 12 and 15 million people are connected to ISKCON temples and visiting and like that. And that's devotees, my opinion. A devotee is not only a devotee who is, is initiated or necessarily always dresses as a devotee or like that. But anyone who has, is accepting Lord Krishna as a supreme personality, a Godhead, Srila Prabhupada as his representative, and like that, that's a devotee, in my opinion. I think that's so. There are many devotees all over the world. That's very, very significant. So anyway, but I was thinking about, so what can we say about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur? And I don't feel qualified to really speak about him and his, because who can really realize the actual identity and personality of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So, but I thought that I'll read something from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He wrote a song that Prabhupada also quite often quoted, Dushtamana, which is a song specifically written to practicing devotees, not to be misled by the desire to pretend to be a devotee, or to think that one is more advanced than one actually is. That's a very, very big danger in when one practices as a devotee, to think that one is more advanced than one actually is, or to start practicing on a level where one is not at, or one is being motivated not by the desire to just be a pure servant of the Vaishnavas and the Lord, but one is motivated by some desire for recognition, popularity, like that. That's a very, very great pitfall for all of us who are practicing devotees. And it's such a such an incredible song packed with instructions that we cannot I cannot say we. I cannot. I don't know about you, but I cannot say that I'm an advanced devotee or anything like that. That's absurd. But I can say I'm a practicing devotee. That's not wrong. Just like, for example, if I'm practicing to play piano or something like that, which I'm not, but if I'm practicing to play a piano, I cannot claim that I'm a master and I'm a new Beethoven or something like that. That would be completely false. But I can say I'm a practicing piano player. I'm practicing for sure. That I can say. So similarly, we cannot make any claims about being anything. But at least we can say we are practicing devotees. We try to practice living as devotees under the instruction of Prabhupada and our spiritual master, the Parampara. So that much we can say. So this song is especially written for us who are practicing devotees. So I thought it's 19 verses. Please listen carefully, because they're packed with instruction. This will be the best in this lecture. The rest will be. But this, I think we can guarantee, this is truly transcendental instruction from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 So I'll read the Bengali of the first verse, and then afterwards I'll read the translations only. It's 19 verses. Dushnamana Tumakesya Vaishnama Patistara Tara Nirya Niragari Tava Harinama Kevala Kaitava. Oh, wicked mind, what kind of Vaishnava do you think you are? Your pretentious show of chanting Lord Hari's holy name in a solitary place is only for the sake of attaining the false prestige of a worldly reputation. It is nothing but pure hypocrisy. 2. Such materialistic prestige is as disgusting as a stool of a hog. Do you not know that it is only a mere illusion cast by the potency of Maya? What is the value of contemplating day and night your plans for enjoying wealth and women? All these things are only temporary. 3. When you claim wealth as your own, it creates in you ever-increasing desires for material enjoyment. Your riches should be used for serving Madhava, the Lord of all wealth. Neither is it your proper place to indulge in lust for women, whose only true proprietor is Lord Yadava. 4. The demon Ravana fought with Lord Ramchandra in order to gain the tree of worldly reputation. But that oasis turned out to be but a mirage cast in the desert wasteland of the Lord's illusory material potency. Please cultivate fixed determination to attain only the steady and solid platform whereupon a Vaishnava ever stands. If you neglect worshipping the Lord from this position, then you will ultimately attain a hellish existence. 5. Why do you needlessly suffer the torment of blaspheming the devotees of Lord Hari, attempting to achieve their eminence, thereby only proving your own fruitless foolishness? The desire for spiritual eminence is easily fulfilled when one becomes a devotee of the Lord, for eternal fame automatically follows the heels of a Vaishnava, and that fame is never to be considered a temporary worldly opulence. 6. The relationship between a devotee and Lord Hari is devoid of even a trace of worldly illusion. It has nothing to do with the materialistic cheating propensity. The prestige of so-called popularity in the material realm is compared to a treacherous dog-eating witch, and the attempt to live in solitude to supposedly engage in unalloyed bhajan is compared to an entangling network of distraction. Please know that anyone striving in either of these ways verily lives in the hell of Maya's illusion. 7. I shall give up chanting the Lord's name publicly in kirtan and retire to solitude, thus smearing myself with worldly honor. Dear mind, what is the good of seeking such so-called glory? I will always remind you that the great soul Madhavendra Puri never deceived himself in that regard by committing theft in his own storehouse of perception the way you do. 8. Your cheap reputation is equal to the stool of a hog. An ordinary ambitious man like you can never be equated with a devotee of Madhavendra Puri's eminence. Under the sway of envy, you have drowned yourself in the filthy waters of material enjoyment after having abandoned the excellent perfection of congregational kirtan. 9. Truly, O wicked mind, the glories of so-called solitary worship are propagated only by false yogis using unscrupulous means to deceive others. To save yourself from these pitfalls, please contemplate the instructions that the Supreme Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu kindly gave us while addressing Srila Sanatana Goswami with the utmost care. 10. Do not forget for a moment the two most valuable concepts he taught. 1. The principle of dry, apparent renunciation as opposed to real, appropriate renunciation. And 2. The principle of a soul being trapped in the bondage of matter as opposed to a soul who is liberated. Don't ever make the mistake of thinking that these conflicting concepts are on the same level. Please remember this while engaging yourself in chanting the Lord's holy names as loud as you possibly can. 11. One is truly a Vaishnava who has given up the habit of falling victim to the ferocious tigress of wealth, beauty and fame. Such a soul is factually detached from material life and is known as a pure devotee. Someone with this consciousness of detachment has thereby become victorious over the mundane world of birth and death. 12. One is indeed detached who moderately partakes of worldly things that are deemed necessary for living in devotional service. A devotee acting in that manner does not fall prey to the disease of material infatuation. Thus devoid of selfish attachment and endowed with the ability to see things in relation to the Lord, all sense objects are then directly perceived as being Lord Madhava himself. 13. This is the standard of befitting renunciation, and one who realizes this is most fortunate indeed. Everything involved in such a devotee's life represents Lord Hari's personal spiritual opulence as manifest in the world of matter. On the other hand, one who engages in chanting the Lord's name with hopes of enhancing his own material reputation finds that all his activities and paraphernalia represent only the riches of hypocrisy. 14. O mind, please reject the company of two types of persons. Those desiring impersonal liberation from the material world and those who desire to enjoy the pleasure of material sense objects. Both of these are equally non-devotees. The things that are used in relation to Lord Krishna are objects belonging directly to the transcendental realm, and thus having nothing to do with the matter. They cannot be either owned or forsaken by persons interested in mundane enjoyment or renunciation. 15. An impersonal philosopher is opposed to thinking of Krishna as an object of devotion, and thus being puffed up with a false pride of imaginary liberation, he dares to criticize the true devotees of the Lord. O mind, you are the servant of the Vaishnavas, and you should always hope for attaining devotion. Why then do you make such a loud commotion by calling to me and trying to prove your supposed supremacy of your practice of solitary worship? 16. One who falsely gives up things that could actually be used in the Lord's service proudly calls himself a renunciate, but unfortunately he can never become a Vaishnava by such an attitude. Abandoning his servitorship to the lotus feet of Lord Hari and resigning himself to his solitary home, whatever is gained by that exercise can only be the worthless treasure of deception. 17. Ever engage yourself in the service of Sri Radha and keep aloof from the vicious snake of materialistic sense gratification. The glory of participating in the Lord's kirtan is not meant to bolster anyone's ambitions for personal recognition. O mind, why then have you abandoned the identity of being Radha's eternal servant in favor of retiring to a solitary place to practice the cheating process of so-called bhajan? 18. The most valuable treasures amongst the Lord's preachers are the eternal personalities residing in Rajyadham. They never occupied themselves with begging for worthless material reputation, which is cherished only by the living dead. The Brajavasis are truly infused with life, and therefore they preach in order to give life to the walking corpses of the mundane world. All the songs that the Brajavasis sing about the glories of Lord Krishna are devoid of any tinge of desire for fame. 19, the last verse. This humble servant of Radha and her beloved Krishna always hopes for kirtan, and he begs all to loudly sing the names of Lord Hari. The transcendental power of congregational chanting automatically awakens remembrance of the Lord and his divine pastimes in relations to one's own eternal spiritual form. Only at that time does it become possible to go off to a solitary place and engage in the confidential worship of their lordships. So, it's packed with amazing information or instruction here. And this song gives a glimpse into the mood of Bhaktsidhanta Saraswati. who was, you can say, truly the personification of true renunciation and rejection of any kind of false renunciation. And that was also, why he was infused with this power of true renunciation. And what is true renunciation? Well, this is to not be attached to anything for one's own sense gratification, but at the same time accepting anything that is favorable for Krishna's service. Isn't it? Anasaktasya visayanyata upayunyata niyabanda Krishna sambandhya yuktam varahyam ujjate. True renunciation is to not be attached to anything, but at the same time see everything in the world related to Lord Krishna, and as far as possible utilizing anything that can be engaged in Lord Krishna's service. As opposed to, you can say, the Mayavad false renunciation of Brahman, Satya, Jnana, and Mithya philosophy, which Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and also Prabhupada strongly condemned. We should not fall prey to this. To think that the material world is false or unreal or not connected to Krishna or illusory or dangerous or dirty, and we cannot use the material energy, we will become contaminated if we use the material energy. All these false conceptions is actually impersonalism. Everything is a manifestation of Krishna's potency. And the only thing that should be renounced is our desire to enjoy Krishna's potency. So one should be completely detached from that, but should utilize everything in Krishna's service. And only by utilizing everything properly in Krishna's service can one actually become detached from the desire to enjoy the material world. If not, if one doesn't do that, if one withdraws and tries to be liberated, one will not become detached, as we hear Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati write here. Rather, one will simply sit in one's isolation somewhere and meditate on women and wealth and thinking I'm an advanced devotee and I will become famous as an advanced devotee and all that. And this is completely illusion. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was the personification of the opposite. He was, he was truly a renunciate. Who can be as renounced as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati? He was a lifelong brahmachari. He was so renounced that when he was 3 years old, he, as a small child, grabbed a mango that was about to be offered to the Lord. And then his father, Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur, he saw that. And he's not even heavily, he just kind of to teach him, said, oh, you cannot touch it. This has not been offered. You cannot take this mango. You can only eat things that have been offered. And this 3-year-old child, he took this so seriously, and he said that, well, I've committed an offense. I take a vow, I'll never eat mangoes in my whole life. And he followed that all through his life, even though he was just 3 years old. 3 years old children don't commit offenses. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he followed this vow his whole life. I cannot eat mangoes. I'm an offender. And that would be his. Even when he was, in his later years, someone would offer mangoes and say, no, I cannot. I'm an offender. And he never tasted mango after that. So in his personal, he was so detached. But still, we see he was a complete master of engaging everything, modern world in Krishna's service. And that put him in one sense in opposition to those who were not able to practice that same level of renunciation, and many misunderstood him. Because by Vaishnavas, and it is true, one should be careful with material objects if one doesn't know how to engage them properly. And Vaishnavas naturally used to live very simple, avoid congested areas, live, not even wear shoes, living in the holy places like that, and living with other Vaishnavas and so on. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he didn't do like that. He followed, and he's naturally Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Thakur. They are naturally extensions of each other. It's the same. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati took over where Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur he left off, and both had this mood of utilizing all the inventions of the modern society in Krishna's service, and instead of withdrawing to solitary places, no, we go to the places which is most congested, in the middle of the big cities. There we preach, that's where people they are. And we utilize whatever is there in preaching. And also we see that whatever is happening, it's actually an unfolding of Lord Chaitanya's plan. That's, I think we also have this tendency to see the modern world, we're condemning the modern world and modern technology and globalization and whatever we are, is there. And it's pretty ugly when it's, when it's simply being developed and utilized for sense gratification, for economic development like that, and it is very destructive of the world. But the vision of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and the great acharyas is actually well acted, but behind this whole development is actually the Supreme Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He has a plan for spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world, and he's engaging everything in his service, including the development of the modern materialists. The modern materialists are thinking that they are developing, all, modern technology for the sake of increasing sense gratification. But actually behind that is Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu facilitating the devotees to be able to preach all over the world. That was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's vision. So he saw that, for example, technology has enabled the production of literatures on a massive scale. So therefore, the printing presses, they should be utilized in Krishna's service. So he had 4 printing presses, one in Mayapur, one in Krishnanagar, one in at least he had 4 big printing presses going almost around the clock, producing transcendental literatures which then were distributed. The printing press, and we know that he termed the printing press the Brihat Medanga, and it's kirtan when the printing press is running, so much so, I don't know, was that in the Bazaar temple? That the printing press was in one end of the temple room and the deities were in the other end of the temple room. Because that is kirtan for the deities to hear the printing press running. It makes noise. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, this is kirtan. It's truly kirtan when the printing press is printing transcendental literatures and then they're being distributed all over by the devotees. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati saw also that railways are being built and roads are being built and cars and vehicles are there. That's also so that devotees they can travel all over and preach Krishna consciousness. And he didn't condemn it. He didn't condemn it. He saw this. He saw the Lord's plan behind this. Also, it's we know that was one thing that when Prabhupada met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati the first time, there was they had the confrontation about Gandhi's independence movement and the British in India. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, established and rightly, defeated Prabhupada in that time. That it's basically it's not an important issue. Political independence. Who cares if we have this political situation, that political situation? They come and go, and they don't make a difference. And it's so urgent to preach Krishna consciousness. It cannot wait for an ideal political situation. And from what I've been able to gather, actually Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was basically against Indian independence. I might be wrong on that, but I kind of from gathering here and there, because he saw the British are here, they're connected to the whole world. We make them Vaishnavas. They will spread Vaishnavism to the rest of the world. That was what he saw was the Lord's plan. So he was, if anything, he was basically in favor of having the British in India. I might be wrong, but it's just kind of as far as I can gather from what from his writing and his mood and like that. There was never any condemnation of the British, and he had even British governors coming to opening of temples as guests of honor, and he was associating with the British, just like as Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur was also very involved with the British, and we don't hear any condemning the presence of the British. Vaishnavas don't get involved with this. Vaishnavas don't get involved with, for or against issues in the material world. Basically, just it's all in that sense an illusion, or it's not important. Vaishnavas use whatever situation is there for spreading Krishna consciousness. That is the real point. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was expertly using everything. Cars. He was driving in cars around, with a chauffeur. One instance, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati came to, was it Radhakund, in a car with a chauffeur, and he stepped out of the car, and he was dressed in a jacket, British jacket. I think he had shoes on, British shoes, and of course that was to the great shock of the Babajis of Radhakunda, and they wondered. Was he asked directly? Because it wasn't that they could not see. I mean, it's obvious he's a brahmachari. Just the effulgence of him, because that's only a lifelong brahmachari who has such an effulgence. So you can see, what an elevated soul. But why are you coming in a car like this with a chauffeur, dressed in British clothes? And what was his reply? Well, I've come to teach the Babaji's renunciation. What renunciation really means. Because, that was his reply. This is a real, true renunciation. And that's how, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati showed that, by constantly engaging everything from a detached position, but engaging everything in Krishna's service, one remains in a liberated position. And also, practically, this is how Krishna consciousness can be spread. And he showed that. When Prabhupada started preaching here in the West, he simply copied, you can say, the success formula of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was incredibly successful in his preaching. He took over from Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur. Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur passed away in 2014. His spiritual master, Gorkha Das Babi, passed away in 2015. And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati himself took sannyas. Which year was that? Was that 16? I say 2000. I mean 1916, 1914. Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur passed away in 1915. Gorkha Das Babaji, and it was in 1916 that he took sannyas, which also, of course, was a little unusual sannyas initiation ceremony. Because when he looked around, he didn't see anyone qualified to give him the sannyas initiation. So he had a picture of Gaura Das Babadi, his spiritual master, and a mirror with, with a mirror image of himself. And he gave himself sannyas with a, like that. And then from then on, he started his preaching mission. Until then, he had prepared himself. He had prepared himself. One preparation was that for 10 years he had just been chanting 1 billion names, which was something like, as far as he was chanting on the level of Haridas Thakur, 300,000 names a day, to prepare himself for preaching. Of course, later on he called that his period of sense gratification, that he was just in solitary chanting Hare Krishna. But it was really for he felt that I have to do this in order to prepare, get ready for myself for this preaching. I need this purification from this immense chanting. So then, from then on, he was preaching, or maybe he was preaching for 18 years and passed away in 36, which means that actually from 1918, that's when he really started preaching. Although he's preaching before, actually he actually had disciples already from 1906. Bhaktsidhanta Thakur ordered him in 1906 to take disciples. So he was already had some disciples from 1906 and onwards. But he started the real preaching, like you can say the systematic Gaudiya Math preaching from 1918 and was active for 18 years. And during those 18 years, he spread or established a Gaudiya Math all over India, and as a really powerful, forceful factor. We don't really have, understand how influential and powerful the Gaudiya Math was in those days. But it was famous all over India. And the purity, the philosophy. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati himself was such a famous person and recognized person. We know he had some enemies like that, but basically he was really accepted and honored and worshipped as a true acharya appeared in the modern age. Many places like that, so that when he came to some cities, I read one description of how he was received when he came to Madras, or which is Chennai today. The whole city closed down for the reception of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. It became a public official holiday. All the officials of the city came out to receive him, and it was like the honor of his head of state was, that was how he was received when he came to Madras. And so he was very influential. Gaudiya Math was very influential. And if it had continued like that, it could have. But by Krishna's will, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he lived in 1936 or 37. It's just around midnight, or in the early morning of January 1st, 1937, something like that, he passed away. And of course we know that somehow, without his presence, the Gaudiya Math was not able to stick together. So the preaching mission was halted for a period until Prabhu started again preaching. But the scale on which Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was preaching and the influence he had was truly enormous. He was, as I said, he naturally got enemies. That's also a symptom of being successful. If you don't have enemies, then we're not doing anything if we don't create enemies. He had his enemies, but in general he was extremely respected and a very popular personality, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati at his time, and so active preaching. He was traveling, constantly traveling, and lecturing on all levels and constantly preaching. He was a constant preacher, and that's obvious. Like also we saw with Prabhupada, Prabhupada was also like that. as soon as Prabhupada opened his mouth, he was preaching. There wasn't small talks, and even seemingly small talk was also some kind of preaching. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was also all the time preaching to anyone, even though, so much so he said that if nobody comes, you preach through the four walls, but you keep on preaching and preaching. And that was, he was just constantly preaching. And he had books being produced and distributed all over in I don't know how many different languages. He had books in Indian languages. He had even a daily newspaper in Bengal, the Nadia Prakash. Daily, it was every day there was a newspaper being printed. It was an interesting newspaper. It was half was regular news actually, mundane news, because that was his. He saw the people they get newspapers. They want to hear about what happened and about this political leader and the news. So the Nadia Prakash first section was the news. So people would read that, and then they would come to afterwards the transcendental news. That's Nadia Prakash. Brilliant way of, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was not afraid of even using, you can say mundane. Because nothing is mundane in his view. It can be used to attract people to Krishna consciousness. Nowadays, there's this talk about bridge preaching and so on. Well, by the way, any preaching is bridge preaching. Because we want to get people to get over here. And if one is able, one can utilize seemingly mundane. What is the word? Mundane things to attract people. If this what can attract, but of course the test is you have to actually attract them. It's not that it's not that we, in the name of preaching, end up becoming materialists. Because the danger of a bridge is you can walk both ways. You have to be a pure person to utilize these facilities. But if it's Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was using mundane things to attract people, and then given them Krishna consciousness once they come. For example, also that he had his exhibits, theistic exhibits. You may have heard about that. He had some very which were enormous events. I don't know if like on the level of World Fair or something like that, but these enormous theistic exhibits where there were also exhibits with moving dolls depicting the pastimes of Krishna and of Lord Chaitanya but also that was not the only thing. The theistic exhibits was not the only thing. There was also exhibits on all kinds of mundane things on agriculture and farming and medicine and there was exhibits there was different things on science and there was even entertainment of what do you call them, amusement parks with merry-go-rounds and like that, which he called innocent entertainment. People bring their children and then they give them a merry-go-round and like that, and then people are attracted. And then they come and see the theistic exhibits, which were massively successful. So, he was very inventive, very creative in preaching, and very successful in his preaching. Utilizing everything all the time in Krishna's service and still being completely, detached from enjoying anything of this world. I don't know. I mean, as I say, what can we say about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati? Maybe you want to add something? Someone want to add? Swami, you want to say something? It's like, one can never get enough hearing about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He's such an amazing and fascinating personality from his very just from the beginning of even his birth is fascinating, and his early life, and all the through. Do you have the biography of Bhaktisiddhanta Swami that he wrote, the Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhava? Do you have that here? You read it, or are you aware of it? You read it? Yeah?
We have not, I know Jananan Maharaj has it in his book, but I don't know the
Very nice biography. It's really well written, and maybe, I don't know if it's the best researched biography on Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's life, but very nice biography. So that we could read that. When we get a chance, read that today and anytime. And it has so much information also. When I read it, there was so much new information that I was not aware of, and also a lot about his disciples. We haven't known so much about his disciples, but many wonderful, obviously many fantastic and wonderful devotees amongst his disciples. They were all fantastic. We hear some, Prabhu had some schism with his god brothers, but we should stay aloof from that. This is between them, and we should simply, of course, follow Prabhu's instruction in relation to how to deal with god brothers and Prabhu. But we should not minimize them in any way. They were tools in the hands of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and also did amazing service, and very great souls, all of them. Very great souls, many of them. So there's a lot about, you get to know all the different disciples who were instrumental in the hands of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in this Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhava, which is also very nice. It's a very good book. Another book, do you know Pranava Prabhu? Devotee. He's also written. It's a more scholarly book, more academic book, but also you can read that, and there's some quite interesting information about, especially the time that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati he operated in. Get very much, which was kind of a this mix, this hybrid time between British influence and traditional Bengali culture, and how both Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur and then of course also Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati as his son, they belonged to this what's called Bhaktiologia group, which were young Bengalis who had British education, highly educated, but then again was endeavoring to somehow accommodate British lifestyle with traditional Bengali values and how to keep the identity and so on. Anyway, it's a more academic book, but also there's some quite interesting depiction of the time that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was living in, and one starts appreciating his expertise in using the time, to do what he did. Just like you can say Prabhupada himself, he came as a Prabhupada was who he was. Would he have been as successful if it had been a different time? Prabhupada, he came just when there were massive numbers of young people becoming disillusioned with materialistic society, turning away from mainstream middle class and becoming hippies. And Prabhupada, just by, of course, Lord Chaitanya's arrangement, just landed in the middle of that and was able to spread Krishna consciousness in that situation. Would he have been able to? Of course, he was able to do anything. Krishna can do anything, but still, he was placed in the just in the right time and place for starting and spreading Krishna consciousness on a great scale. So similarly, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was also there in a particular time and circumstance, and was expert. He just fit into that for preaching Krishna consciousness. Similarly. And of course, we have a little older biography. Rupa Vilas wrote this Ray of Vishnu, very nice biography too, which we can read. Any questions?
We have to mention also that he was inventing a system for speed writing.
Yeah, Picanto.
Vicanta.
Picanta.
Yeah.
Picanta, yeah. Was he using it?
So actually, I don't know in which condition he was using this system, but it was a very inventive process.
Yeah, it was when he was quite young, you know, when he went to school or early college or like that. Then he invented this kind of speed writing.
Mm-hmm.
Is it still preserved? Does anyone know it or how to use it? Or no?
It should be something. A common character of Korea, certainly. Korea or
Yeah. I don't know. Probably, if you want, it's interesting, you could visit the Bhaktsidhanta Research Library in Calcutta. You've been there? You know it's there?
Yes.
I was there once. I thought that was fascinating. And there they have a lot of the original writings of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. The whole Nadia Prakash, you know, is they have a collection of the whole Nadia Prakash is one thing. And many things of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur and other interesting things, including they have a copy of original, you know, manuscript that probably Lalithanath's handwriting is on. You know that? Because you will give a lecture on Sikshastakam and say that was the only thing he wrote, and that's true. But there seems to be there's a manuscript where there is handwriting of some verses from Bhagavatam from 10th canto, and out in the side there's some handwriting that say this is probably Lalithanath's own handwriting. Could be Gadadhar Pandit's handwriting of the Bhagavatam verses, and then there's some handwriting of Lalithanath. So that's one thing. But they have and they're trying to collect a complete collection of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's writings at the Bhaktisiddhanta Research Library. So that would be the right place to go and see if you also can find some of his, you know, his speed writing, his system like that. Which, in one sense, it's not my impression that he. It's not something that he pushed like that. But maybe I don't know if he used it through his life like that. Of course, speed writing in those days was important because that's before the time of recording devices, tape recorders, sound recording devices. So that's how when someone you recorded a lecture, you know, there had to be a speed writer who could write as fast as someone is speaking, and this way that was how lectures were recorded back then. So we have some lectures of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and I don't know, but I assume that someone was speed writing when he was speaking. But of course, for his early life, there's so many amazing things. You know, the fact, you know, how did he learn English? You know that, you know, the way he learned English was that, well, he got a dictionary and then he locked himself up inside a cupboard for 3 days, and he was just learning the dictionary. And he knew, and we know that he's what is it called? You know, someone who remembers everything just by not Jatismara. Shrutidara. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was a Shrutidara. That's also, we might, you know, read in the scriptures about that in previous ages, you know, everyone was a Shrutidara, but then, you know, that ability was lost with the advent of Kali Yuga, and therefore writing had to be introduced, and this is the introduction of writing, which is not advancement, it's actually going back with writing. You think it's a step in, you know, advancement, but it's going backwards. So we might think this is mythology, you know, how can there have been people who could hear things once and remember them the whole life? But we don't have to go, you know, we don't have just to think. It's not mythology, because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, you know, he's a historical person, and he had that ability, and that's testified. You know, he was, you know, even in his late years, when someone asked him, he could remember everything he had read previously, just read once, he could repeat it verbatim. That's why he was called also a living encyclopedia. But but he learned English by learning by heart the dictionary, and he had a vocabulary that was amazing. And actually, when you read his English writing, it's very difficult to, you really have to actually read it several times, and try in several words you have to look in the dictionary. What does that mean? Of course, then you find it's so precise, what he writes, but it's very lofty, very lofty. He was better at English than British-speaking people, and so much that there was an English or American professor, I don't remember his name, who came and had a talk with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and he came as a skeptic, but afterwards he was really impressed. He had never met a scholar and a saintly person on that level, and he couldn't speak on anything. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati could speak on any topic and impress anyone with his knowledge of that particular topic. When was he? 7 years old? He knew the whole Bhagavad Gita by heart. He was lecturing on the Bhagavad Gita when he was 7 years old. Isn't something like that? So yeah. So his early life is fascinating. He's.
Do you know something about the lecture or recommendation he gave to his preachers who were going to the West before? There is a famous.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
I don't remember also in detail, but I have seen it, I've read it, I've heard it. It is there somewhere. There was one devotee who made one of our academic scholars. He's from Finland, and he specifically wrote his PhD thesis on Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati sending his preachers to Britain and know what they were accomplishing. He's somewhat not completely connected with ISKCON, this devotee with some Gaudiya Math or something like that. So there was something about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He was giving some lectures before they left, but I don't remember exactly. But it was a major thing for the Gaudiya Math when they were sent off to Britain, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was sending funds along with them, and it was really a big undertaking, considered a big step. Now we're starting the preaching in the Western countries. Okay, I think we're over time, isn't it?
I just want to add something what you just said. It was very nice that you mentioned that for us Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj disciples, we should look up to them. They're as good as Prabhupada, or like you're saying, they're very knowledgeable, they're very powerful. It's a very good point because I really appreciate it. General tendency is that not even like our generation, we tend to say that Prabhupada didn't get any help. It's all written in books, and we kind of get carried away by these kind of things. It's not our prospect. We should be respectful and appreciative rather than between exalted souls. So thank you for that. That's a very good point. Even like Prabhupada disciples, that sometimes we take them for granted, but it is not up to us. It's between Prabhupada and them, what they do or what they.
And it's a very essential instruction. This principle that if one observes disagreements amongst advanced or senior devotees, it's important that one doesn't take sides. Of course, with Prabhupada, of course, we are Prabhupada's followers and like that. But one should not take sides It's actually Vrindavan Thakur and Chaitanya Bhagavan especially who was warning against that, and the context is the seeming schism between Nityananda Prabhu and Advaita Acharya, which is just mock fighting. But but it's seen very serious, and Vrindavan Das Thakur is constantly warning: don't take sides when Vaishnavas are disagreeing. If you do, you take sides for one Vaishnava against another Vaishnava, you will fall down. That's so that's a very important. And he repeats it. He keeps on repeating that as it's really important not to. We should respect all Vaishnavas, but then of course we should also know our line. We are followers of Prabhupada. We are initiated by Prabhupada or into Prabhupada's society, and we understand the world through him, or even other writings of other acharyas should only be understood through Prabhupada's teachings, and that's just standard. Our loyalty is 100% to Prabhupada, but we respect everyone. We should respect anyone who is a devotee, an advanced devotee, no doubt. So it's delicate. It can be a tricky balance.
So Srila Prabhupada said also that we should respect his brothers, but we should not follow their teaching.
No, and we shouldn't take their association too close either. And and it's so it's a delicate thing. It's a delicate balance. But
But then for Jesus Christ also, he said that we have much respect for Jesus Christ, but we cannot follow his philosophy.
No.
Although he's very elevated, so.
Yeah. We don't mix. We have to. We follow one line purely. We don't pick little from here, little from there. That's not the process. That means chastity. That's chastity. Just like, I don't know if that's exact same example, but for a wife, she follows her husband. It doesn't mean that she doesn't have to think that all other husbands are rotten or like that. They can also be nice husbands, but that's not her husband. She follows her husband, and we follow Prabhupada. We chase to Prabhupada, and afterwards chase to what he created. Prabhupada created the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He created the GBC that has taken over his authority after his passing. We follow and remain chaste to that. That's another point. We cannot, because some have the idea we follow Prabhupada, we don't follow the GBC. And Prabhupada said that's not possible. That's not an option. We have to remain within the International Society for Krishna Consciousness as Prabhupada he set it up. At least that's my understanding. Okay. Jai. Thank you for your patience and tolerance. Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki. Bhaktsidhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj ki. Go. Hey.
Lalithanath Prabhu ki.